Okay, so it's 10 o'clock. We're going to get started. My name is David Lee. I'm with MSS Business Transformation. Welcome to our webinar slash podcast, which means we're recording this, and it'll be available later to people who joined and also to the general public on our website at mssbta.com. Like I said, I'm David Lee. I'm the head of business development here. We are talking about organizational change management. And we have two of our organizational change management gurus with us. First of all, we have Heather Haxton, and we also have Michele Farnsworth. Heather, how did you get into change management?
Starting early on in my career, I won't date myself by saying how many years ago, but started in technical writing outside of college, and that kind of morphed into being able to write training materials. And then once on a few projects, people realized that training could translate to talking to people about things happening with the project, morphed into change management. So it's been a long road. But
so you're one of the pioneers of change management.
I wouldn't go back that far or take credit for that, but certainly have been involved for a long time.
Okay, not that long. Michele, how did you get involved?
When I was getting my MBA, I got my MBA from Pepperdine, I found I was struggling with finding my fit really in the business world, business administration world, and discovered organizational development and change and leadership as kind of a real niche where I fit in. So became a change manager after that, or an organizational development consultant, and then eventually a change manager. That was about 12 years ago. So been ProSci certified and been working in change management for about 12 years.
Great. And you are both part of MSS. So I want to start off with a general question, a little bit general, and then we're going to get into more specific things. But when I look at change management and what people talk about when they're talking about change management, I tend to think, isn't that just leadership? But I'd like to understand what the difference is. It's become a discipline over the last 15 years. So what's the difference between just good leadership and change management?
I think change management, if you look at it and you identified it correctly as being a discipline, just like good leadership or effective leadership is a discipline, there's a method to the madness that gets applied, especially at the project level, for larger enterprise change efforts, if you think of ERP projects and things like that. Following a methodology, whether it's from ProSci or one of the other schools of thought around change management, it's an application of tools, templates, and processes to affect change for not only that particular project, but perhaps at the enterprise level as well. And that would be what would tie in at the enterprise level with good leadership and effective leadership disciplines. So definitely a difference between the two.
I think it's the application of two different skills. I think we have leaders in our organization that are visionary and they're really focused on getting us to the next level. But with change management, we need to look back and we need to look at our employees as the building blocks for what that next level change would be. So while we have great leaders, are they communicating messages down to the individual level? Are they creating sustainability for change? Different things like that. I don't think that that's necessarily an expectation of a leader. I think we look for active and visible leadership and sponsorship on our projects, but getting down to that individual level and ensuring everybody is comfortable with a given change or a rapidly changing environment where you're seeing changes come from left and right, I think that we need a little more focused skills around that.
Yeah, I think there's statistics that say that most leaders, when they get into a change management sponsorship role, they're not really even aware of what their role in that is. So it's people like you who bring that and coach them through that process. So let's get into what is change management, because when I talk to people, they all say different things. ProSci has its own definition. It's the process and tools to manage people's side of change to achieve a business outcome. But let's get a little bit more into it. Michele, what do you think change management is? How do you define it?
For me, I think human capital is the most prized asset of most organizations. I think the use of our workforce towards enabling differentiators, enabling velocity towards change, those types of things are really a building block of our organizations. And so I think the ability to create that adaptive workforce is really change management. And it could be the application of tools and templates, but it could just be networking and getting people to know each other and have more empathy for one another and what they're going through. I mean, that's a key element of change as well. So there's definite deliverables that are around that, but there's also some vision and cultural changes that need to take place in an organization.
I think along with what Michele just said about human capital management, it's the recognition of an organization as an organism itself, if you will, where you have to have certain synergies that work well together in order to make that organization move forward. Change is one of those things. The ability of an organization to recognize its culture, to adapt its culture, make changes necessary for transformation efforts, again, to propel themselves forward. All those things have to come into play. And that combines a series of tools, templates, processes, as well as the partnership with various leaders throughout the organization to make those alignments that are needed.
And the discipline of change management, they talk about project level versus enterprise level change management. Heather, what's the difference?
Project level that's probably the area that I've been operating the most over the last 10 or 15 years of my career. That is where you could have one single initiative or perhaps a series of related initiatives that require change. They could be interrelated, but it's again just for that one particular effort, that one moment in time, that you're telling people what's happening, when it's happening, what's going to be happening to them, and what to expect after the change happens. But it's not necessarily something that's continuous as part of an organization's approach to managing itself and managing their own changes.
So if you get into enterprise change management, what do we mean when we talk about enterprise?
Well, with enterprise change management, it's typically an organization that's tried some project level change management, and maybe they're evolving into a rapidly changing organization where changes are happening within several different business units across several different projects. And in order to really kind of build up the program of change management, we're creating tools and templates that can be used across the organization, procedures that can be used on every project. And it's really rolling out that change management thought leadership to the whole organization. So everyone kind of has it in the back of their mind, and they're ready to apply the principles as they've been outlined by that organization. And it really makes the company more agile and better able to respond to changes.
I've heard it compared to the difference between building a house, which is project level, one house, and developing a neighborhood where you have multiple efforts going on at the same time.
Right.
And it's a lot like having a project management office to have an enterprise framework that everybody can use, right?
Right.
As we look at it from a maturity level and we start looking at how organizations can advance and how they do change management, there's this immature stage, which is probably where most of our clients start, moving into putting it at a project level and enterprise level, and then institutionalizing it. So that's making it part of everything you're doing. Then there's the strategic level, which is a bit different. Do you want to, Michele, maybe comment on what happens when you get into more of a strategic approach?
Well, I think it's very interesting. I used the word agile before, but when you're looking at the strategic approach to change management, everything around you is rapidly changing, and it's really a key differentiator for your organization. The ability to quickly adapt to changing environments, make decisions faster, be able to follow through on taking advantage of your competitive differentiators, whatever that may be, whether it's speed to market or quality control, whatever the case may be. It's able to be just a more agile organization. And I don't mean that by the project management term. I mean just the ability to change and adapt rapidly to the outside environment and the inside environment.
To change faster than your competition.
Right.
And when you get to the top level of that, really the word change management sort of disappears because
Right.
it's just engrossed in everything you do. Now that's kind of an unattainable level. There are companies out there that we can say are at that level, but it's a relative thing. Most of our clients are really at that project level, enterprise level, because they're just starting to get involved with it. When you are getting involved with change management, Heather, how do I know that I'm being successful? How do I know that I'm doing it right?
That's, if we look at it at the project level, that's looking at feedback that you get after the change happens, doing pulse surveys. What do your smile sheets look like on your training program? asking the right questions
Okay, I'm
to
gonna stop
not
it. What's
just
a pulse survey? Tell me what a pulse survey
so a
is.
pulse survey is exactly like taking your own pulse. You're putting a finger on what's happening in the organization. So you could do it by audience, you could do it broad-based, but it could be as informal as asking your managers to have conversations with the people that they report to, or have them report to them, but give that feedback back. It could also be surveys, actual surveys using survey tools, and doing metrics based on that. But pulse surveys is one of the most effective ways to kind of get that feeling of what's happening.
It's
Other
like putting a
metrics,
Fitbit on my organization.
exactly. And what the metrics come back from that, are people effectively managing how the change has been implemented for them? Are they using the tools the right way? Are they following the correct processes? If they're not, how adaptive is the organization to handle those requests for additional change or enhancements to what's been introduced? So tying in with change management and being able to handle those things as they occur, again, is a tie back to good, effective leadership, as well as the implementation of change as part of your culture.
Now you mentioned some metrics like pulse surveys, and so what are some of the key metrics that tell me that I'm doing change management well?
Again, at the project level is that feedback. You would also look at, for example, help desk metrics around new tools or processes that have been introduced. What are your spikes? You could also look at organizational responsiveness in measurement to business process. So, for example, if you've replaced your AR system, accounts receivable, how long is it taking to process key invoices and processing payments and receipts? If your timing has gone down, people are getting it faster and they're doing it more effectively than what they were before. So there's a series of measurements that are pretty unique to each initiative that you do. But again, looking at what the feedback is from the organization, how leadership feels the change has happened, along with some hard metrics if you can get the tangible metrics.
There's the project metrics, but I think the hardest part about change management is there's no control group. There's no example where you say, okay, if we did this project without change management or we did it with change management, we don't actually know what the difference would be because you don't get that opportunity. However, I will say that I was talking to a technology company. We won't say their name. They're in the Northwest. They're big. And they do implementation of the same system over and over and over and over again. And sometimes they get the opportunity to apply change management, and sometimes they don't. And so they actually do have that control group. And what they found is that when they get to do change management with it, and they use the similar methodology that we do, the adoption and utilization of that is 5 times as much in the first year. So there is evidence that change management makes a difference. But what are some of the risks associated with change management, and if I don't do it correctly, Michele?
Well, I think one thing that comes about is there could be pockets of resistance in any organization. So you're rolling out a new software system, and you wouldn't necessarily think there'd be a huge amount of resistance to that. But if you think about how people do their jobs every day, it becomes almost automated by the way that you do your job, and you're doing things by muscle memory. So when you change up that system, oftentimes you're having a visceral reaction to that. So you have pockets of resistance that come about. So we really, as change managers, we're really focusing on where does the resistance lie and how can we communicate to those pockets so that they're a little more comfortable come day one and they're ready to do their job. So I think that, that's definitely one of the risks that you're looking at, is that people aren't able to be honest and forthright with their thoughts and provide that feedback that they have.
So when people ask me the value of it, I think of it from a financial standpoint. If you don't do change management, you may still achieve your goals eventually, but you probably won't fully realize them, but it'll also take a lot of time.
Right.
Or longer period of time. Have you been in that situation, Heather, where people have been delayed because of the lack of change management?
Absolutely. Some examples, again, a classic example is an ERP implementation. So you're going from perhaps a series of homegrown systems to one centralized system. Change management, incorporating communications and training in an overall platform for change for an initiative like that is really important. If it's not done effectively or not done at all, what will happen? People will find workarounds. They'll avoid using the tool. the opportunity costs that rise from pockets of resistance can be very costly to an organization, especially after they're looking for their return on investment from that software change. The change in people. What's the risk of attrition you have? Because people, again, don't feel that they've been trained properly, or they weren't forewarned that this big change was coming. What if financial reporting changes within the company? The books look a little bit different. That can all be part of the higher risks by not doing change management than actually addressing those things up front and letting people know what's coming.
It's interesting too, is that I've been in situations where people were all for the change until they started to learn what the change was bringing, and then they start to become resistant to it.
Right.
So,
It's a constant circle of resistance or that may pop up, and so we want to manage that. But it's a constant circle of, oh, I've just found out that, my login is different. Something as simple as that can really throw someone off.
yeah. So both of you have been in a fair number of change management programs, and you've gotten to the point probably where you can walk in and pretty quickly understand what is whether it's being done well or not. What are some of the red flags that indicate that maybe this project's already going down the wrong path? Michele?
I would say a key one for me is usually when you deliver projects, you start to think about sustainability, right? How are we going to get this going at delivery? But I look at it as sustainability occurs at every junction of a project, whether it's an iterative release, and so you're rolling out different pieces and people need to sustain that change, or whether you just need to continue the momentum for change. So I think sustainability is a huge issue that you really need to focus on at all junctures of a project. Even well after a project, you think about go live and we're sustaining this project and what's our transfer plan back to the business unit, but really it's how are we going to keep this momentum going and actually utilize this as a competitive advantage.
But Heather?
And again, at a project level, some of the more simpler red flags that you can walk into is, okay, we're going to do communications. That's great, but what about the other part of it?
What kind of communications?
What kind of communications are you doing? Who are you communicating to?
Sending an email, man.
Yeah, some people would say it's as simple as sending an email. Well, who's the signature line on the email? Who's the voice that's crafting that email?
Who are you targeting with that email?
Yeah. Other times could be, we on the other end of the spectrum, we've got training in place. Okay, so you might tell people when they're going to training, but what are they being trained on? Why is this happening? It's one foot in front of the other, or it's not balanced. The other part too is if you go back to organizational maturity, some of them may say, we just hired a change manager. Okay, so you've got change management, you know what it is, you're going to fill a position for it, you're going to pay someone a salary to do this, but where is that person aligned in the organization? What are the expectations for that role? And how does leadership partner with that resource?
And how many projects do they have
Exactly.
going? Because if it's more than 2, they just become an administrator.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and
Very much.
And if you have more than a few projects, if you're at that enterprise change level, my favorite one is, we have a guy who does that. And it's like, okay. That means they're just, at this pace, they're only filling out forms. They're not influencing how the change is going, or affecting it, are they? So, my favorite one has always been, we've assigned a sponsor. Okay, did that sponsor have anything to do with coming up with the change? Are they bought into the change? Are they passionate about the change?
Have they been prepared themselves? Are they ready to lead through this change?
Yeah, and are they willing to? It may just be a career move for them, but it may not be exactly the right position. So,
Sure.
Any other red flags?
I think there's a lot of alignment there. There's a lot of thought out there that change management is an HR function. That it's, Heather alluded to that when she was talking, that it's aligned to a certain organization or department in an organization. And that's not really true. I mean, change management surpasses HR. It really has to do, it surpasses IT. A lot of times we're set in an IT environment, and it really just goes beyond that, and it's really all-encompassing of all of the different stakeholders. It's not just one stakeholder group or one goal or target, it's everything.
So one of the things that is a big question, I think, for any company out there that's looking at this saying, am I ready for change? Do I need change management? What level do I need change management? How do I get started? You two have come up with a pretty simple solution to get started, and that's the OCM Assessment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The OCM Assessment is a tool that's available on our website, and it is a series of questions that any practitioner, you could be a business leader, you could be PMO, you could be someone in IT, department or enterprise level, doesn't matter, but walk into the survey and look at some of these questions. They're very general when you first start, but then we get a little bit more specific. It's a great tool that you can use to kind of see where you are as an organization on a simple scale, 1 to 5, and then coming out of that assessment, looking at the measurement that you get. And it will also be a little bit thought-provoking too, because where you see that you measure lower, obviously that's places where you could address it. And there's some great tools available for ProSci, general practitioners. We've got information as well, but it's just a great tool. I mean, starting out in change management, when I was a project manager, I would have loved to have had access to a tool like this.
It's just a
very helpful.
It's a quick way of
Yeah.
understanding where you are starting from. So if I take this, what's the outcome that I might see? What would be an example of what the results would bring?
You could take the results and look at it from that maturity management scale that we were talking about. And if you're just looking at this and you're identifying with it through a project that you're currently assigned to, obviously you can say, well, from a maturity scale, then we're just looking at it as ad hoc, project level, single instance. But if you walk into it and you come out of the measurement where, okay, I've done this a few times on a few projects, our project management office is starting to incorporate some of these tasks in our SDLC or whatever it might be, then you're at a little bit more of a mature stage. But it helps you measure your maturity level and then also identify gaps where you could fill.
That would be my feedback, is that it really does help you do that gaps assessment that you need and figure out how you can shore up some areas in your organization to be, again, more agile or better able to adapt to the changes that you see coming down the pipeline, whether that's one project or whether that's a suite of projects. Looking at it and saying, where do I really fall, and what do I need to shore up, and how can I get some help with this?
And we have examples of some questions. Well, what are some questions that would be on the survey?
One of the questions that I think we kind of aligned with in this was talking about leadership and their value of change management. So one of the questions we have is, does your leadership value change management as a competitive advantage or differentiator for your organization? Michele spoke on that before. That was a really key point in aligning leadership and the value of change management as it brings to the agility of the organization.
Right, we want that key differentiator to be the ability to change and to mobilize their workforce.
Okay, how about another one?
Another question that we had in the survey was, have you adopted or created a common and consistent methodology, expectation, and language for change management? Again, that's very important. It alludes to where you're at in your maturity level, and then also what tools and templates do you have, if you have any? Do you speak the language of change management, and where it aligns with what you're executing on?
And then a third example?
I think a really great example is a really simple approach. Does your organization apply a standard approach to change in some key initiatives? That's really simple. Are you looking at a change management approach from the outset that can help address your changing architecture or whatever it may be? But it's really just think about it. Do you have a structured approach to how you're going to manage the workforce and change through this initiative?
And these are only three of, I think, a ton of questions that you can go through, although the survey itself or the assessment itself only takes about 15, 20 minutes. But it's up to me, I think one of the great uses of this would be as a tool to take to your leaders and show them, hey, this is something that we need to start thinking about.
Right, I would say more than anything else, it's a thought-provoking point, let's say, that where you can really look at, how we can shore up different things in the organization.
And it's a great opportunity, too, for those that are just about to embark on a large initiative, whether you're in senior leadership with an organization or perhaps a project manager that's on the books for a series of projects that you need to execute on. Getting that measurement early is going to be critical to the success of your project, because it'll, again, really help you approach that project with a holistic view and identify, again, those gaps that you might have.
Right.
So again, that's available on our website at mssbta.com. It's free. You can just sign in and take it. We're going to move to some Q&A here, since we only have about 5 minutes left. And we're going to make it so that you can either send it in by chat, right,
Yep,
Jessica?
so they can go ahead and send it in by chat. We're going to also enable audio, so if you have a question.
So we're enabling audio, and you can also send by chat if you're more shy. We do have a couple of questions that came in before we even got started, and I think you alluded to one of these before, but when it comes to training and communications, that a lot of people think change management is training and communications, or training or communication. But really, what is the difference between change management on the whole and then just doing training and communications?
One of the key parts of change management as a discipline that's above and beyond just communications or training is doing overall impact assessment of what the change is going to happen in an organization, from leadership down to your frontline managers, down to the employee, and then doing that consistently throughout the beginning of the project, as well as each life cycle that it goes through, or each milestone that you reach, is reassessing those changes and then developing the plans to initiate communications about those changes, as well as the training. The other part of it too is that typically a change manager will not be the same as a disciplinary skill to be able to necessarily develop training per se. They may not be an e-learning developer. They may not be a technical writer. So there's still definite differences in how these people support these projects.
So change management is really about making sure training's happening, it's getting to the right people at the right time, and it's the right kind of training. But in terms of actually delivering the training, that takes a special resource, yeah?
Correct.
I would agree. I think one of the key differentiators between just communication and training also is looking at the fact that change occurs on an individual level. Now, if people are writing wide-sweeping communications about what's changing, are they really considering how an individual is looking at that? Are they looking at getting everyone on board? Or are they just saying this is what's going on and get on board or not? And even while we try to equip supervisors and managers with those type of messages, I think we need to look at what specifically needs to be said in order to get everyone on board with the change. And that's never, I think that's kind of a lofty idea, everyone on board with the change. But we really want to reach out to individuals and communicate on their level. And it's much more strategic communications as opposed to a wide-sweeping email that comes out from a sponsor. It's really targeting what an individual needs to get through the change.
One other question that came up is, okay, if I'm from a leadership position, say I'm the CEO of the company, God forbid, I'm the CEO of the company, but I'm looking at it from that point of view, and I just start this initiative, I wanted to get it going, and it's now part of my program to execute that initiative. Why do I need to know about change management? Why do I even care?
I think one of the key success factors in any project is active and visible leadership. So while leaders are out there and they're considering what it takes for the whole company to succeed, they need to be active and visibly participatory in every change too. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're reaching individuals at a certain level either. It just means that they're lighting the path towards change. And I think that while you're looking at all of the success measures of a leader, it may not necessarily mean that they're getting everybody on the boat at the same time.
All right. Jessica, do we have any other questions coming in?
Nope, that pretty much sums it up.
Pretty much sums it up. Okay. That was a great podcast. If you have been listening and you do want to send in other questions to have us answer, you can do that. You can send to advisory@mssbta.com. You can visit our website at mssbta.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. We're just open for communications all over the place. So there will be for those who attended the webinar or registered for it, there will be a follow-up email with a link to this podcast and we will send out the presentation as well, or you will be able to download it.
Correct, so they can keep an eye out for it.
So I think that's it. Thank you, ladies. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, David.
Thank you, David.